Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating journey into the family of Lord Shiva. We're exploring his children, drawing from the Divine Offspring, the Children of Lord Shiva podcast source material.
Yeah, and what makes these stories, so compelling isn't just the mythology itself, it's how they offer these really lasting insights.
Insights into what drives us.
Exactly. Our strengths, devotion, the wisdom we look for, our sense of duty, and dharma, righteous living. They're not just old tales, they kind of mirror our own lives.
That's a great way to put it. So our goal with this deep dive is really to get to know these divine children better, understand their stories, their meanings.
And see what wisdom we can take away today.
Let's start maybe with Shiva himself as a father. The source sets that up first.
Right. Because to really get Shiva's children, you have to appreciate his own multifaceted nature. The podcast we looked at really stresses this.
He's got that duality, hasn't he?
Totally. He's the fierce ascetic, the adiyogi lost in meditation. But then he's also this loving husband and father figure, Parvati's consort.
And that duality is key.
It's crucial, yeah. Because his children, each in their own way, seem to embody different parts of that. Well, that complex divine personality.
That makes sense. It's like they're facets of the same gem. The source talks about how some show his power, others his wisdom.
Even his creative side.
Yeah, it makes the divine feel, I don't know, richer, more relatable maybe.
Absolutely. It moves away from just one single idea of a god and shows this beautiful complexity through his family.
Okay, so the children. Where do we start? The source kicks off with, well, probably the most famous one, Ganesha.
Ah, Ganesha. The remover of obstacles, always beloved. And his origin story, as the podcast details, is pretty unique. It's quite a tale.
It really is. Tell us how that goes. The source says Parvati actually made him from turmeric paste before her bath.
That's the story, yes.
Yeah.
She breathed life into this form and gave him a job. Guard the door. Keep everyone out.
Simple enough, you'd think.
Well, until Shiva returns home.
Yeah.
And he finds this boy he doesn't know standing there, blocking his way.
So a confrontation, misunderstanding.
Almost inevitable, yeah. And the source recounts that Shiva, in his anger, he beheaded the boy.
Wow. Just imagine Parvati's reaction, the devastation.
Oh, profound grief, according to the source. And it was because of her sorrow that Shiva promised to bring Ganesha back to life.
But how? That's the really unique part, right?
Definitely divine problem solving. He told his attendants, Nadi and the others, to bring the head of the first creature they found facing north.
And that creature happened to be an elephant.
An elephant. And that's how Ganesha got his distinctive head. But, it's not just a quirky detail. The source really digs into the symbolism.
Right. That elephant head means something much deeper. Oh, the podcast explains it. It symbolizes intellect, wisdom, memory.
Huge capacity for knowledge.
Exactly. And I found it interesting how the source stressed that Ganesha teaches humility and inner strength. Like, even great intellect needs that grounding.
And think about his place in rituals. The source points out he's almost always worshipped first, before starting anything new.
Why is that, specifically?
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that the biggest obstacles are often internal. Our own doubts, ego, fear.
So you clear those first.
You address those inner obstacles before you tackle the external world. It's about preparing yourself, your inner space, for the journey ahead.
That's powerful. Clearing the internal landscape. Okay, so after Ganesha, the source moves to Shiva's second son, Kartikeya.
Yes, Kartikeya, who also goes by Murugan, Skanda, Subramanya. Lots of names.
And his birth, as the podcast highlights, was totally different from Ganesha's, wasn't it?
Completely different circumstances. Ganesha's felt almost, domestic in origin. Kartikeya's birth was a response to a cosmic emergency.
Right, the gods needed a warrior to beat the demon Tarakasura.
And the prophecy said only Shiva's child could do it.
But Shiva was deep in meditation at the time.
Exactly. So the gods, they had to intervene, a bit forcefully, maybe. They sent Kama, the god of love, to basically break Shiva's focus.
Which didn't end well for Kama, as the podcast points out. Shiva's third eye, poof.
Reduced her to ashes, yes.
Yeah.
But indirectly, that set things in motion for Kartikeya's eventual arrival.
So then Parvati and Shiva unite.
And this incredibly powerful divine seed emerges. So potent, the source says, that it had this epic journey, carried by Agni, the fire god.
Then cooled in the river Ganga. Wow.
It really speaks to the immense energy he embodies right from the start.
Talk about a dramatic entrance. And the podcast explains he was born with 6 faces. And raised by 6 celestial mothers.
In the Saravana lake, yes, which is why one of his names is Shanmukha, six-faced.
And what's the symbolism there of the 6 faces?
Well, the source connects them to the 5 senses plus the mind, all 6 aspects of how we perceive and think. He's mastered them all.
So he represents, what, youthful energy?
Youthful courage, yes. Strategy, leadership. He's the divine general.
And he's particularly revered in South India, the podcast mentioned, Tamil Nadu especially.
Deeply revered there as Murugan, patron of warriors, destroyer of ignorance.
It's fascinating how the 2 brothers embody such different but equally vital things. Ganesha, wisdom, obstacles; Kartikeya, courage, action.
Exactly. One clears the path with intellect, the other charges ahead with righteous might.
Okay. Now, the podcast also brought up someone less known, Ashokasundari.
Yes, Ashokasundari, often called the forgotten daughter, as the source puts it. Her story isn't as widespread.
Which makes it great that the source included her. So what's her origin?
It comes from the Padma Purana, apparently. Parvati was feeling lonely after Kartikeya left for the mountains.
Understandable.
So out of this longing, and using a divine wish-granting tree, the Kalpavriksha, she created Ashokasundari.
From a wish-granting tree. That's beautiful.
It really is. A creation born from love and maybe a touch of sadness.
And her name, Ashoka, means?
Remover of sorrow. And Sundari means beautiful.
A fitting name. And she was destined to marry King Nahusha.
Yes, a powerful king who even ruled the heavens for a time. Her story, maybe quieter than her brothers, symbolizes grace, peace.
The divine feminine.
Exactly, the divine feminine, even when it's not in the spotlight. Its inherent strength and beauty.
A good reminder that importance isn't always loud. Okay, then the podcast shifts gears a bit to some more intense figures, starting with Andhaka.
Ah, yes, Andhaka. His origin itself has darker shades, born from Shiva's sweat, or maybe his third eye's energy, depending on the telling.
Either way, it suggests something raw, untamed.
It definitely sets a different mood. The podcast says he was adopted by Hiranyaksha, the demon king. Grew powerful, but also arrogant.
That seems to be a recurring theme, power leading to arrogance.
And that arrogance led him down a really dangerous path. The source says he saw Parvati and was overcome by desire. He actually tried to abduct her.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine Shiva's reaction to that.
Incandescent rage, you'd assume. The podcast describes a fierce battle, and Shiva ultimately struck Andhaka down.
But that's not the end of his story.
No, and this is the really crucial part, the deeper lesson. In defeat, Andhaka had this moment of clarity, realized his mistake.
He repented.
Humbly begged for forgiveness, yes. And Shiva, showing immense compassion, not only forgave him, but blessed him.
So, even born from darkness, driven by desire, there's redemption.
Exactly. The podcast emphasizes that he represents ignorance, arrogance, desire, but also the possibility of repentance, of profound transformation. It's quite a message of hope, actually.
It really is. That change is always possible. Okay, next up, another figure born from Shiva's intense energy, Jalandhara.
Jalandhara, yes. Another dramatic birth. Energy from Shiva's third eye falls into the ocean.
Talk about making us flash.
Indeed. Raised by the sea, the source says. And he became incredibly powerful because of that divine spark, powerful enough to challenge the gods.
But again, that power, it got twisted.
Yes, tied up with ego. And, like Andhaka, a destructive desire for Parvati seems to be a fatal flaw for these figures.
It really does. So how did his story end?
Well, his power was immense, partly tied to his wife Vrinda's devotion. Vishnu had to intervene, tricking Vrinda to weaken Jalandhara.
Ah, so his power wasn't just his own, it had a foundation.
And when that foundation was shaken, Shiva was able to defeat him. It highlights that true strength needs righteousness, not just raw power.
So Jalandhara is more of a cautionary tale.
Definitely. The podcast makes it clear. Even divine energy, if it's corrupted by ego, becomes destructive. Power without humility leads to downfall. A stark warning.
A very relevant warning even today. Now, the podcast also briefly mentioned Bhumadevi and some other names.
Just briefly, yes. Bhumadevi is sometimes symbolically linked to divine energy, like the Earth's fertility. More of a conceptual link in some texts.
And figures like a Lakshmi or Jyoti.
The source notes they appear in some local or folk traditions, but clarifies they aren't really considered direct offspring of Shiva in the mainstream narratives we're focusing on. More like symbolic figures in specific contexts.
Got it. Important to make that distinction. So, pulling it all together, what's the big picture? The spiritual significance of all these diverse children.
What's really striking, as the source summarizes, is how each one embodies something distinct. Ganesha, wisdom, removing obstacles.
Kartikeya, Courage. Doing what's right, Dharma.
Ashokasundari, the quiet grace, peace, the feminine divine.
Andhaka. Transformation, the power of saying sorry, basically.
And Jalandhara, the danger of ego, misused power.
It's like a complete spectrum of experiences and principles all within one divine family.
Exactly. And the podcast really nails it by saying how relatable their stories are, despite being ancient myths. Their pride, their falls, their growth, redemption.
We see ourselves in them.
We do. Echoes of our own struggles and quests for wisdom, which makes them continuously relevant.
Which leads perfectly to the final point. The podcast explored the lessons for us today in modern life.
Yes. It connects the symbolism directly to challenges we face now. Ganesha, for example.
It reminds us to think before we leap. Address the obstacles first.
Precisely. Mindful action, thoughtful planning, not just rushing in.
And Kartikeya, his courage.
That resonates with the need to stand up for what's right, for Dharma, in our own lives, in society. It's a constant challenge, isn't it?
It certainly is. And Ashokasundari.
Her story, maybe, encourages us to value unseen grace, inner peace, the quiet strengths that often get overlooked in a noisy world.
That's a lovely thought. And Andhaka's journey.
Such a powerful message of hope, really, that mistakes don't have to define us, that repentance, genuine change is always possible. Redemption isn't off the table.
So important to remember. And finally, Jalandhara's fall.
A huge warning sign about unchecked ambition, about ego, how easily striving for success can curdle into arrogance if we lose humility, especially relevant today, maybe.
Absolutely. It really ties everything together. This whole deep dive, guided by the source material, shows just how much depth there is. It's way beyond simple stories.
It offers these profound reflections on being human, on the divine. And the source encourages that personal reflection, doesn't it? Asking how these stories speak to our own growth.
Yes. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Shiva's fascinating family, maybe we can leave our listeners with a thought to ponder.
Consider these contrasting journeys we've discussed. Wisdom, war, grace, arrogance, transformation.
What part of these diverse stories resonates most strongly with you? And why do you think these ancient narratives might still hold such power and relevance in your own life today?
It's worth thinking.